This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes only. Any names, places, or events described are imaginary. The following content is meant to create suspense and atmosphere without promoting harm, violence, or real-world fear. Viewer discretion is advised for those sensitive to eerie themes. The night an entire village vanished is not a story people tell lightly. It begins quietly, the way most terrible things do, without warning or noise. Imagined place so ordinary that no one would ever expect it to disappear. A small village tucked away between dark hills and endless fields, where the air smelled of wet soil and wood smoke, and every house knew the sound of its neighbor's footsteps. On that night, the ether hung low and heavy, like it was pressing down on the earth, and the moon barely showed its face, hiding behind thick, drifting clouds. The village was alive just hours before it vanished. Warm lights glowed through windows. Dogs barked in the distance. Somewhere, the radio played a soft, familiar tune that blended into the night. Doors were locked as usual, curtains were drawn, and people went to sleep believing morning would come as it always had. No storms were forecast. No warnings were given. Nothing felt wrong, except for a strange stillness that settled after midnight, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. This story follows one observer, someone who would later tear-eyed to understand what happened. A lone traveler passing near the village, drawn inside the promise of rest and shelter. From the edge of the road, the village looked peaceful, almost inviting. Rows of houses stood neatly in place, and a single streetlight flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows across the ground. The traveler remembers feeling watched, though no faces appeared at the windows. The silence was deep, unnatural, the kind that makes your ears ring. As the night stretched on, something began to feel off. The wind died completely. Leaves froze in place. Even insects went silent. The traveler noticed that the streetlight stopped flickering and stayed dark. No footsteps echoed. No doors opened. It was as if time itself had slowed, thick and heavy, trapping everything inside it. Sense of dread crept in, cold and slow, tightening around the chest. The traveler stood there, unsure whether to move forward or turn back. The houses looked the same, but something invisible had changed. The air felt empty, hollow, like the village had already been abandoned long ago. His name carved into a wooden sign at the entrance seemed faded, almost erased, as if it was trying to disappear along with everything else. The feeling was not fear alone, but confusion, an overwhelming sense that reality was slipping. Then came the moment that would never make sense. Without sound, without light, without warning, the village seemed to lose its presence. It did not crumble or burn. It did not collapse into the ground. It simply stopped being there. One blink, and the warmth was gone. The houses stood empty, doors hanging open, lights extinguished. Beds were untouched. Tables were set for breakfast that would never be eaten. Every person, every trace of life, gone. Yea, morning, the sun rose over a place that no longer felt real. Birds avoided the area. The road leading in felt longer than before. Authorities would later search for answers, but find none. No signs of struggle. No bodies. No explanation. Just an entire village erased between night and dawn. Those who heard the story dismissed it as rumor, a horror tale meant to scare children or chase views online. Yet the traveler never forgot that silence, that frozen moment when the world held its breath. And the most disturbing part is this: no one knows what happened after midnight. No one knows where the people went. No one can explain why the village still stands, empty and waiting, as if something might return. Some say if you visit the place at night, you can still feel it watching you, waiting for the right moment. Because if a village can vanish once, there is nothing stopping it from happening again. The traveler did not leave when the sun rose. Something held him there, rooted to the edge of the empty village like a warning he could not ignore. Morning light revealed details the darkness had hidden, and somehow that made everything worse. Every house stood perfectly intact, yet none felt lived in anymore. Windows were clean, curtains still tied back, but there were no reflections inside, as if the glass looked into nothing at all. The silence had changed too. It was no longer the quiet of sleep, but the quiet of absence. He stepped into the village slowly, each footfall sounding too loud against the ground. His voice felt wrong in his throat, but he called out anyway, hoping for an answer he already knew would not come. No response followed, not even an echo. The air smelled faintly of smoke and old food, as if life had been paused in the middle of a normal night. On one porch, a cup sat on the railing, still half full, the liquid inside untouched. Inside another house, clock ticked on the wall, marking time for no one. As he moved deeper, he began to notice patterns that made his skin crawl. Every door was unlocked. Every bed looked slept in, blankets folded back as if people had risen in a hurry. Shoes lined up neatly giving entrances, never worn again. It felt less like people had fled and more like they had been lifted out, removed all at once. The traveler had seen abandoned places before, but this was different. There was no decay, no dust, no sense of age. Everything felt freshly abandoned, as if the village was still waiting for its people to come home. He soon learned this place had a history. A faded notice board near the center listed events from years past, harvest festivals, community meetings, missing posters that had never been taken down. One name appeared again and again, scribbled in different handwriting across old notices and walls, almost like a warning or a prayer. He could not tell what it meant, but seeing it filled him with unease. The village had known fear long before this night. As the day wore on, strange things began to happen. The traveler heard footsteps behind him, slow and deliberate, yet whenever he turned, the street was empty. At times, he felt presence just out of sight, close enough to make the hairs on his arms rise. Shadows seemed darker than they should be, stretching in directions the sun did not allow. Once, he swore he saw movement inside a house, figure passing a doorway, but when he rushed in, the rooms were bare and cold. He tried to leave Gyoa late afternoon, but the road felt wrong. It curved strangely, looping back toward the village no matter which direction he took. Landmarks shifted. A tree he passed minutes ago appeared again ahead of him, unchanged. Panic began to creep in, slow and steady. The village was not just empty, it was closed, like a trap that had snapped shut. As evening approached, the atmosphere grew heavier. The air darkened faster than it should have, clouds rolling in thick and low. The temperature dropped, and with it came a faint sound, almost like distant breathing or whispering carried by the wind. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. The traveler realized the village was not dead. It was watching, listening, waiting. When night finally fell, lights flickered on inside some houses, one, despite no one being there. Curtains moved as if brushed aside by unseen hands. The same street light from the night before buzzed back to life, casting those long, trembling shadows again. The traveler stood frozen, heart pounding, understanding that whatever took the villagers had not finished its work. And somewhere in the darkness, something stirred, something that remembered the people who once lived here, and now knew someone else had arrived. Night fully claimed the village, and with it came pressure that made the traveler's thoughts feel slow and heavy. The lights inside the houses no longer flickered randomly. They moved with intention, switching on and off as he passed, as if guiding him, or herding him, toward the center of the village. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs felt weak, untrustworthy. The silence had returned, thicker than before, broken only by the soft hum of electricity and his own uneven breathing. He chose one house at random and stepped inside, hoping walls might offer some protection. The door creaked loudly, the sound echoing longer than it should have. Inside, the air was colder, sharp enough to sting his lungs. Furniture sat neatly arranged, family photographs still lined along a shelf. Faces smiled from behind the glass, men, women, children, caught in moments of happiness that now felt cruel. As he reached out to touch one frame, the glass fogged beneath his fingers, and for a brief second, he felt warmth on the other side, like pulse. He pulled his hand back, heart racing. That was when he heard it clearly for the first time, a voice. It was faint and distant, almost lost beneath the hum of the lights, but it was unmistakably human. It called out softly, stretching his name in a way that suggested familiarity. The traveler knew no one here, yet the voice spoke as if it had known him for years. He answered before he could stop himself, his voice cracking as it echoed through the empty rooms. The reply came not from one direction but many. Whispers slid along the walls, crept across the ceiling, brushed past his ears. They spoke of ordinary things, chores, meals, worries, as if the village was replaying fragments of its former life. The sound was overwhelming, intimate, and deeply wrong. He fled the house, stumbling back into the street, only to find the village square now lit brighter than before. At the center stood an old well he hadn't noticed earlier. Its stones were worn smooth, and the rope hanging from it swayed gently, though there was no wind. As he drew closer, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. This was no accident. Whatever had happened here began at this place. The realization brought a new fear, not just of being trapped, but of being chosen. A second presence made itself known then. From the shadows near the well, a figure emerged slowly. It was human-shaped but wrong in subtle ways, moving too stiffly, as if unused to its own body. The traveler recognized the face from the photographs. Inside the house, middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a gentle smile. Now her eyes were empty, reflecting no light. Her mouth opened, but when she spoke, it was not her voice that came out. It was many voices layered together, speaking in unison. She did not approach him. Instead, she pointed toward the well. Images flooded his mind, people standing where he stood now, night after night, drawn inside the same pool. One by one, they leaned over the well, listening, offering something unseen. The village did not vanish in a single moment. It was slowly given away. The figure faded back into the darkness, leaving the traveler shaking and alone. He understood now that the village was not empty. It was full, crowded with echoes, memories, and something far older that wore them like masks. The secondary terror settled in when he realized the road had not trapped him by accident. The village needed witnesses. It needed replacements. The whispers changed tone, becoming sharper, more demanding. The lights around him flared brightly, then dimmed, like pulse. His reflection in a nearby window looked delayed, moving a moment after he did. He felt himself thinning, as if the village was slowly pulling him apart, thread by thread. The fear was no longer just of dying, but of staying, of becoming another voice, another shadow warning future visitors too late. Somewhere deep beneath the ground, something shifted, responding to his growing panic. The well rope tightened, creaking under sudden tension, as if something below had grabbed hold. The traveler backed away, knowing that the village had not finished showing him its truth. And the night was still young. The traveler ran, but the village moved with him. Streets stretched and bent, houses leaning closer as if listening. Every turn he took led him back toward the square, toward the well, toward the slow, breathing heart of the place. His lungs burned, legs trembling, yet the ground felt soft beneath his feet, like walking over something that did not want to let go. The night air pressed against his skin, heavy and damp, carrying those whispers that no longer tried to hide. They spoke clearly now. Not shouting, not pleading, inviting. Promising rest, promising answers. Promising an end to the fear if he would only stop running. Each word felt personal, shaped exactly for him, pulling at old regrets and buried memories he had never shared with anyone. He clutched his head, trying to block them out, but the voices were no longer just sounds. They were thoughts slipping into the spaces between his own. He ducked into another house, slamming the door behind him. The moment it closed, the world outside went silent. Inside, the lights turned on all at once, bright and harsh. The room looked different from the others. This place felt watched more closely, as if it mattered. On the walls were more photographs, but these were not of villagers. They were of strangers, travelers, hikers, drivers, faces frozen in moments of confusion or fear. Some were old, yellowed with age. Others looked recent. All of them ended the same way, their eyes unfocused, hollow. His stomach dropped as he realized the truth forming in his mind. This had happened before. Many times. The village did not disappear once. It fed slowly, patiently, drawing people in when it needed more. The villagers had been only the beginning. A sudden bang echoed from upstairs, followed by the sound of footsteps pacing slowly back and forth. The traveler froze, every muscle locked. He knew better than to call out. Whatever was up there did not need directions. The steps grew closer, stopping just above him. Dust drifted from the ceiling with each careful movement. Then came a soft scraping sound, like fingers dragging along wood. The lights flickered, and the room dropped into darkness. In that blackness, something stood behind him. He felt its presence like a breath against his neck, cold and damp. It did not touch him, did not rush. It waited. His reflection appeared faintly in a dark window ahead, but it did not match his movements anymore. The shape behind him was visible there, tall, blurred, its edges shifting like smoke. It leaned closer, studying him, learning. When the light snapped back on, the presence was gone. The front door stood open. Outside, the village square glowed brighter than ever, the well at its center pulling his attention like gravity. He understood now that hiding only delayed the inevitable. The village wanted him to see something. To understand enough to choose. He stepped back into the street, dread settling deep in his bones. The houses around him were no longer still. Curtains moved constantly. Shadows pressed against windows from the inside. Faces appeared briefly, then vanished. Watching him pass, the whispers rose into a low hum that vibrated through his chest. The well rope creaked again, louder this time, strained under a weight that should not exist. As he approached, the ground around the well was crowded with faint shapes, impressions in the air where people should be. They stood shoulder to shoulder, staring down into the darkness below, frozen in the moment they were taken. He could feel their fear, their regret, their understanding arriving too late. The village had shown them just enough, the same way it was showing him. The traveler stopped at the edge of the well. Cold air rushed up from below, carrying a sound that was not the voice but felt like one, ancient, patient, endlessly hungry. It did not demand. It did not threaten. It waited, certain that time would do its work. Behind him, the road shimmered briefly, as if teasing the idea of escape, then faded back into darkness. His knees shook as the whispers fell silent all at once. The village held its breath. Somewhere deep below, something shifted again, closer now, responding to his presence. He knew that whatever choice he made next would change more than just his fate. And the night was not finished with him yet. The traveler leaned over the edge of the well, fighting the urge to step back. The darkness below was deeper than night, swallowing the faint glow from above as if light itself was unwelcome there. Then he saw something that made his breath catch. Reflected in the black surface was not just his face, but the village behind him, alive. Lights burned warmly in every house. Shapes moved through windows. Laughter drifted faintly upward, soft and distant, like memory replayed too many times. He straightened quickly, heart racing, but when he turned around, the village stood empty once more. Silent. Hollow. The reflection in the well showed a different truth, one that did not belong to the present. It showed the moment before everything was taken. Or worse, it showed the version of the village that still existed somewhere else. The whispers returned, clear now, and for the first time they spoke honestly. This place was not prison. It was a crossing. The village had not vanished, it had been moved. Folded away into a space that sat just beneath the surface of reality. The well was the doorway, and the people had gone willingly, drawn years promises of safety, of being spared something far worse that was coming. The horror was not that they were taken, but that they had chosen to go. The travelers' legs weakened. Chosen meant something had convinced them. Something that could speak to fear and hope with equal ease. Something that was doing the same to him now. Images filled his mind of the outside world, cities collapsing, darkness spreading, people running with nowhere to hide. The village offered an escape. A place outside time. A place to wait until everything else ended. Then came the twist that shattered him. The whispers revealed that the crossing demanded balance. The village could not remain hidden unless someone stayed behind to take its place. A watcher. A voice. A guide. Every time the village fed, someone was left to keep the door open. The faces in the photographs were not victims. They were replacements. The realization crushed any hope he had left. He had not been chosen by accident. He fit the pattern. Alone. Passing through. Unlikely to be missed. The road had bent for him because it always does. The village did not hunt randomly. It waited for the right kind of person. The well rope tightened again, pulling upward this time. The air shimmered, and the empty space around him filled with shapes, more solid now, more defined. The villagers stood there, their faces calm, almost peaceful. They did not look trapped. They looked relieved. Among them, the woman from before met his eyes. There was apology in her expression and gratitude too. She had once stood where he stood now. He screamed, backing away, but the ground gave slightly beneath his feet, tilting him toward the well. The voices grew urgent, overlapping, no longer whispering but pressing into him from all sides. They told him he would not be alone. That he would have purpose. That he would save others by staying. In a moment of desperate clarity, he understood the final cruelty. Even if he escaped, the village would remain. It would call someone else. It always did. Survival was not victory, it was delay. The real question was not how to get out, but who would pay the price next. The night stretched on, heavy and unending. The well waited. The village watched. What would you do in this situation? Do you think the protagonist will survive? The traveler's back hit the stone edge of the well, pain flashing through his spine as the rope creaked louder than ever. The whisper stopped all at once, replaced by a deep, pulsing silence that felt alive. It was no longer asking. The village had decided. The air around him thickened, pressing in from every direction, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. The ground beneath his hands felt warm now, faintly vibrating like a living thing. He screamed and clawed at the stone, forcing himself upright. Fear gave way to something sharper, rage, refusal, the raw instinct to survive. He grabbed the rope and pulled with everything he had, not knowing why, only knowing it was part of the trap. The moment he touched it, images flooded his mind. Hundreds of faces. Hundreds of nights. Each watcher before him had stood here, made the same choice, felt the same terror. The rope was not his tool. It was tether. He tried to let go, but his hands would not obey. The village surged closer. Houses leaned inward, walls groaning softly. The well answered with a low sound from deep below, like a breath drawn after a long hunger. The presence beneath it rose closer, filling his thoughts with certainty. There was no escape left to run toward. There was only resistance or surrender. With a final burst of strength, he wrapped the rope around his arm and threw himself backward, using his weight to pull against whatever held it from below. The village reacted violently. Light shattered. Windows cracked. The ground split in thin, jagged lines. The whispers returned as screams, layered and frantic, as if the village itself felt pain for the first time. Something broke. The rope snapped free from the well, whipping backward and sending him sprawling across the square. The sudden silence was deafening. The lights died. The fog thinned. The pressure lifted, just enough for him to breathe again. For a moment, hope flickered, small, fragile, dangerous. Then the well began to collapse. Stone crumbled inward, falling into the darkness below. A sound rose up from it, no longer patient, no longer calm. It was furious. The village shook as if caught in an unseen storm. The shapes of the villagers wavered, flickering like dying reflections. Their calm expressions twisted into fear. They had not expected this. The watcher was not meant to fight. The traveler staggered to his feet, stumbling toward the edge of the square. The road shimmered again, brighter this time, solid enough to see clearly. Escape was finally possible, but it came at a cost he hadn't expected. As he ran, the village screamed behind him, not in voices but in breaking stone and tearing air. The presence below the well lashed out, pulling at the fabric of the place that had hidden it for so long. He crossed the boundary of the road just as the village folded inward on itself. Houses collapsed into shadows. The square vanished. The well sealed shut with a final, echoing crack. Silence rushed in, sudden and absolute. Morning came. The traveler lay on the side of an empty road, sunlight warm on his face. The village was gone. Not empty, gone entirely. No houses. No square. No well. Just flattened earth and tall grass swaying gently in the breeze. It looked peaceful. Normal. Impossible. Authorities would later say nothing had ever been there. Maps showed no village. Records were clean. The story should have ended there. But nights were no longer quiet. Sometimes, just before sleep, the traveler heard a familiar sound, rope sliding slowly against stone. Sometimes reflections lagged behind him, just a fraction too late. And sometimes, when the world grew very still, he could feel something watching, waiting for the moment he let his guard down. The final truth revealed itself slowly, cruelly. By breaking the tether, he had not destroyed the crossing. He had moved it. The village was gone, but the door remained, and it was no longer bound to one place. It was bound to him. The days that followed felt unreal, like the world had shifted slightly out of place. The traveler was found by a passing driver just after sunrise, disoriented and dehydrated, lying beside a stretch of road that did not appear on any map. He tried to explain what had happened, speaking carefully at first, then faster as the memory is pushed forward. A village. A well. People who vanished use choice. A place that folded in on itself. The words sounded wrong the moment they left his mouth. Empty. Impossible. The driver listened politely, then drove him to the nearest town and forgot the story almost immediately. That became a pattern. Every official he spoke to dismissed it. Records showed no village. Satellite images showed nothing. Historians laughed gently and suggested exhaustion or stress. Even when he returned to the area with others, there was only open land and grass bending in the wind. No marks. No ruins. Not even a scar where the well had been. It was as if the place had never existed at all. But he knew better. The answers came slowly, painfully, in fragments he never asked for. The village had been a shelter, not from disaster already known, but from something sensed long ago. The people who lived there believed the world was thinning, that certain places could slip between moments if fed properly. They were not the first to pee or sigh, if they would not be the last. The well was an anchor, and the watcher was the cost. Someone had to remain close, someone connected enough to keep the crossing stable. When the traveler broke the tether, the village collapsed inward, destroying its physical form, but the mechanism survived. The crossing adapted. It always did. Life moved on, at least on the surface. He returned home. Took a job. Spoke to friends. Laughed at the right moments. But sleep became an enemy. Dreams pulled him back to the square, to the edge of the well that no longer existed. He woke with rope burns on his hands that faded gray morning. Sometimes he heard whispers just before dawn, not voices anymore, but intentions. Invitations. Strange things began to happen around him. Lights flickered when he entered rooms. Roads felt longer at night. Once, while passing through a quiet neighborhood, he caught a glimpse of something familiar reflected in a dark window behind him, cluster of houses that were not there when he turned around. Another time, he passed an open field and felt the same pressure in his chest he had felt near the well, like the air itself was waiting. The final answers came with understanding, not relief. He had not escaped the role of watcher. He had inherited it. The crossing no longer needed a fixed village. It needed proximity to the world, mobility, access to people who would never be missed too quickly. Through him, it could appear anywhere, briefly, subtly, just long enough to call someone closer. He fought it at first. Avoided travel. Stayed among crowds. Refused to listen when the world grew quiet. But resistance only made the pull stronger. The crossing did not force him to act. It didn't have to. It only waited for moments of weakness, lonely nights, empty roads, people already halfway lost. The first time it happened, he didn't realize what he was doing. He stopped to help a stranded car on a foggy road, feeling that old familiar stillness settle around him. The fog thickened. The silence deepened. For just a moment, the world folded, and somewhere nearby, something opened. He never stayed to see the end. Now he understands the villagers' calm faces. The relief. The apology. The road doesn't end. It passes on one way or another. Some nights, when the world goes quiet and the air feels wrong, he stands by a window and watches reflections that don't quite match reality. He wonders how long he can keep walking away. He wonders if choosing not to choose is still a choice. And somewhere, just out of sight, something waits patiently, knowing time always wins. If you were in his place, would you peer aside to fight it, or accept what you've become? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you want a sequel, because some doors never truly close.